Okay, gang, we have been looking at drawing with ink and pen, which most of you had a good idea about anyway. We just looked at different kinds of pens that we might want to work with. But now we're wanting to take a look at drawing with a brush. And there's two basic ways of doing that. One is called brush drawing. That makes sense. And the other kind is called wash drawing. Brush drawing works with any kind of ink that you might have, and you draw with it with a brush. And then wash drawing is layers of multiple values of single ink or multiple inks. And they are compatible. They're compatible with working with pens as well. But let's jump in and take a look at brush drawing to get started. Okay, here we go. What kind of mark it's going to make. Now see, this is not my favorite brush to draw with. It doesn't have a lot of spring to it. It's got a little bit of a spring, but not a lot. Brushes tend to bounce back. Some brushes just lay there, barely there. And those aren't fun to work with either. Also, you have to see how deep the ink goes, because you don't want much ink up here, because you're probably going to get in close at some point and get all over your fingers. So what I want to do is I just want to begin to get a sense of what kind of mark the brush is going to make, and begin to get a sense of the feel for when you can get a fat line versus a thin line. And you can see immediately that I wasn't controlling it completely, so it's not exactly the same curve on both sides. That could be a problem if you're wanting something to look very symmetrical, which is why a lot of folks will draw with a pencil first. Nothing wrong with that in the process. So if I wanted to draw that little bottle, I might look at it in the way I'm seeing it right this minute. You'll remember the idea, using the axis, playing with this outside shape, looking at the, sort of breaking it into parts. So I could do that first, and then use that information, if I want to begin doing this. Now, a lot of you like to lay your hand down on the paper. That's not a bad idea, except when you've got liquid ink, because then you're kind of you can imagine it, you've seen it with pencil. We do that all the time, and then we smear it. You really want it on your sleeve. So I'm going to do something immediately because of that. I'm thinking not all your drawing with the brush has to be about line. Some of it can be about shape. We were talking about before, the idea of negative shapes, silhouettes. I just drew the outside of the bottle without having to do I didn't do a line. There's a line on the edge of the dark to the light. And then I can hybridize that with a super thin line here, a little thicker line on the inside that then has to disappear, and then pretty dark on the inside. I don't have to do the whole shape. And then if I decide I think I need some gray, but not black everywhere, I can I might even decide if that really is a shadowed side. Picking up a little bit of the wet ink again, coming back. blending that shadow in. And then once the ink is completely dry, I could come back and erase my pencil lines, which will be a much bolder kind of look. So, though we can, of course, draw without pencil lines. That might be scarier for some of you who are used to being able to do that. See me sort of drawing with that, what I've tended to do before, when you see me do my kind of quick gestural stuff. I'm not afraid of sometimes having something that's a little off. Again. If there's water on the inside. Now, let's try something else. If this was completely dry, this would be safer, okay? So, but I'm gonna do a little bit of a wash. I cleaned my brush out with water, and now I'm gonna apply a little bit of ink and water together. Some of that up here as well, since it is a dark colored kind of lid. And that can be done with dry brush as well. Even though you're using water, you can let it run out. You know, I could do that up here as well. That's kind of dark over there, but you know, it is a darker, the green is kind of dark, so I'm getting rid of some of the extra liquid. And before it is dry, you can also use your paper towel and create an image that way, okay? And there's nothing wrong with drawing with just a grayer ink application. And if you then decide that that would be good to have with a darker ink, you might come back in. All I did was rub the inside of the lid where there's little excess ink. Since it does have a lot of inky water in it, I'll go ahead and play with that. And lastly, I think I'll do kind of a dry brush. Now, the dry brush is easiest to do when it's drying out. You know, as you saw in the video, the line can go a long time when the brush is full. When the brush is full, it can go a long time. Even a small brush can keep going and keep going and keep going. But it's not designed to have ink coming out of the bottom or on the sides. So if you let it dry out, it's going to be, you get the dry brush thing where you get this sort of broken, almost charcoal kind of mark making. But if you do it on the side of the brush, even though it's maybe really wet, it ends up being kind of broken. Now, we look at that and go, well, what good is that? Well, sometimes we may want something that looks like a piece of wood, the texture of wood, the texture of a brick. I can imagine using that for a sandy beach, or a piece of rock that's got a little bit of texture to it. And yeah, we can still go over that. That's one of the things I love about ink is if you've got a good ink that begins to dry, see, I'm going over it and it's not messing up. I can come back with something darker, and when I do layers, suddenly I'm not messing any of those other marks I've made before up. I can then, see, I can easily turn that into an image where I'm building up lights and darks on top of each other. Now, I've begun to do the wash concept here. So for this part of the video, what I want to take a look at is wash drawing. I've already sort of mentioned wash drawing, but we haven't been doing what is traditionally considered wash drawing. We've just been drawing with a light ink, if you will, a lighter version of ink. What we want to do with wash drawing is actually begin to create layers of value, layers of ink, thinner inks, and creating all the way from light to dark. It's easily combined with brush drawing or with pen drawing as well, but I think it's a very different skill and a very different way of working, so I want you to take a look. Let's take a look at what this one looks like. That's pretty light. I'm going to get it even lighter. I want it to be, well, my brush is messy. Let's see. Let me see what I've really got. That's fairly light. Okay, so there's hardly any water in this one. Let's see if this one's got about the same. So I'm going to put a lot of ink in this one. Let's see what that looks like. That's pretty dark. I'm going to take a little bit of this, pick up a little more ink there, put some of that in there. Check this one again. It's even a little darker, good. Let's see what this one is. Okay, so I've got a light in the middle and the dark. Middle, light, dark. This is from the handout as opposed to the video. So let's say I've got a shape that I want to show some shading on. And I'm going to show you the two basic techniques. I'm going to do the same one that's in the handout so that it's just easier, it makes more sense. So I've got this, whatever I'm going to be drawing, I've got this rectangular shape this time. It's like a little box. And I've even got a shadow. So the light must be coming, if the light was coming from here, it'd be casting a big shadow, but I'm sort of making it come from the top and front, so it's got a shorter shadow. Okay? Gonna do another one. So I'm gonna first show you the one I'm gonna finish the first is the simpler one in terms of the technique is basic and straightforward and simple, and it gets used a lot. And this one is going to be, this is the simpler one in some ways, but this is actually simpler in terms of the way it's done. It's just one thing over and over and over and over again. This one requires you mixing up a light in the middle and a dark, okay? So this is multiple layers. Apparently I'm heavy-handed today. Of one value. This is multiple values, light, middle, and dark, and black if we need it. Each in one layer. Does that make sense? Multiple values, multiple layers of one value over and over and over again. And then this will be one layer each of each value. So, I need you to do me a favor. If the light's coming from mostly up top, but also sort of from the front on top, which area do you think is going to have the most light bouncing off of it? If the light's coming down, where would it be?
Tip of it, like right there. Yeah.
Yes, you're absolutely right. So let's decide that's going to stay with just paper, okay? We could do it with a light gray and then build up, but let's leave that one, make it simple.
Yeah.
And this surface and this surface are now, they're parallel to each other, right? So here's what I would tell you. This could be a blue box and that could be a gray tabletop, right? But if they were the same color, they're going to bounce the same amount of light at you. So these are parallel, so they're going to be basically the same value. That makes sense, right? Okay, so in this idea, we're going to leave the tabletop white and the top of the box white. But in this one, what we're going to do is this. Everything that's not this and this, we're going to paint the light gray. Okay? So the top stays untouched. Top of the box and the top of the table, because the light's coming from the same direction. The same amount of light will be bouncing off the two parallel surfaces. That's a good general rule. In fact, the same amount of light is going to bounce off of a blue surface and a light gray surface. But what bounces will be a little different, because it'll look like it's the same amount of light's going to bounce off the two parallel surfaces, no matter what their color is. A little bit of that color will change the amount of light that bounces, but not much. So everything that is not the top or the top of the table. So that means even this, all of this, it's just one quick value everywhere that isn't the top of the box. Be a little more careful with the edges. The side of the box, front of the box, and the shadow. All one value. Make sense so far? Okay. So, same light conditions are going to be over here. The top of the box is going to stay white. Tabletop's going to stay white. But the lightest, whatever the lightest is, I'm going to go ahead and put that in. Now, I said the light was coming from the top and then slightly from the front. So if it's white here, it's going to be fairly light here, because the light's also coming from the front a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and put the lightest gray down right this minute. Okay. My next darkest is going to be, if this is light gray, the surface that's closest to that is probably this background. It's not exactly the same, but I'm going to say it's a little darker than this. Okay. So I'm going to come to a middle value. Now, here's the problem with this technique. If you don't let it dry, it can run. You just see that I accidentally touched it and some value ran in.
So I'm in trouble. Now you could let it dry completely, but a lot of times have you ever been impatient when you're drawing? Have you ever been impatient about anything? That's kind of normal for most folks. Oops. Nope, John, don't do the wrong one. Now, I'm sort of creating a puddle here, and we haven't talked about doing that before. A couple of things are happening. The table may not be completely flat. And see how it's building up over there? That may be because the table is not completely flat. There's another reason. Paper buckles when it gets wet. And I can see that it's actually higher here, and then it's buckling there and there. So if I need to, while it's wet, I can dry my brush. My brush can act like a sponge and pick up excess ink. The trick is you don't want to be scraping the paper, but you just want to be kind of, in fact, a lot of times I always like to touch the puddle. You can see how the paper shows up being white for just a second. If I do it too long, I'll actually leave a white, sort of a white mark. Here you see how it's puckering. If you can come in, pick up the excess that's over here. It's not puckering as much on the side. And that it doesn't have to be perfect, okay? But now I've got a light and a middle value. Now the next darkest is probably going to be here. Let me see how dark that's going to be. Yeah, that's good. Now I'm really could get in trouble because this is a nice dark. And if I get really close to that, which I need to be, it's going to bleed out. Now I don't think bleeding out is always terrible when it comes to an ink going places it's not really supposed to be. It's kind of fun. That said, probably don't want it very often. Now, what I would tell you is, as you do this, if you don't want it to bleed into the next section, you probably want the paper to be dry. If you want the paper to be completely dry, as you come down for your next pass of ink wash, you don't just feel whether it's dry. If the paper is cool to the touch, that means but it doesn't feel wet on the top surface. In other words, if you put your finger on it and it feels different, like I'm going to do here, and I'm going to go here. This doesn't feel wet, but I feel it's cooler. That means that inside the paper, there's more liquid trapped inside still. And if it's liquid on the inside, when you put something on it, it's gonna bleed out faster. Now, if it was completely dry on the outside and maybe a little bit of moisture inside, it wouldn't. You can put a little bit of something on top of it without it bleeding, but not a lot. Because if you get this much stuff on it, immediately you're gonna get in that situation. Now, here again, I've got this, it's buckling and it's kind of dark at the front corner. That might be nice. I might like to leave that, but I'm gonna get rid of some of it anyway. Okay, good. Now, I said it was still cool over here. I'm gonna wait, or maybe I should go ahead. At least get, okay, so this is gotta be darker, and so anything that's not this or this needs to get darker. Yeah, well actually this is already a little bit darker. But I'm going to come back to my original, remember? And so I'm going to get, this is white, this is going to be the next lightest. So everything that's not this needs to get a little darker. Luckily this one already got there somehow. I must have gone over it too many times, but that's giving that a little time to dry so I can put my next bit of stuff on. But remember, everything that isn't the white or this light right here needs an extra coat. This particular technique requires you to let the parts dry because every part gets re-wet except where there's not any ink going down at all. Okay, is this making sense, guys? So the next time I'm going to put something down, I'll be putting something down here, and then the last thing I'll come back and I'll put an extra coat there. So then I'll end up with each in a separate step. Okay. Now I get to be really dangerous. Almost pure ink for my shadow. There's a little bit of water in my brush, which I actually like, rather than a pure black. Notice I'm trying to leave a little bit of a white line because I know it's kind of wet. Because I can come back and I can add a little. If I waited for it to be completely dry, I wouldn't have to do that. But if I'm not waiting for it to be absolutely dry, and when I'm done, I can come back and add a little extra ink there. I can come back and add a little extra wash in the other places. But you can see why people like this one more a lot of times, because it's quick. This is sort of like the Jiffy Pop or the microwave popcorn version. This is more of the old-fashioned popcorn in a kettle or in a pan. But one of the values of this one is, you can almost sort of begin to see it. As I put another layer on, I put another layer, I put two or three more layers on. I might have to get like 4 or 5 layers to get this dark enough. I might have to get 2 or 3 layers here to get this one dark enough. But the idea is, it all fits together. It sort of holds together, more atmospheric. It's a little bit more like the way a photograph looks, or the way our eye perceives light and dark. There's none of this little lines that we have to fill in later on. This one looks more like a, do you remember those, have you ever seen those thicker wooden puzzles for kids, little babies, where the parts are, it sort of looks like, it's like one of those jigsaw puzzles. Like all the parts just fit together. This seems more atmospheric. It might be useful. Now, I would also say there are certainly other ways to do this. You know, yes, we could very easily do a quick down and dirty version. And for some of us, that might be more fun. And I bless you, bless you. And I, for one, enjoy sometimes coming in and having a more playful hybrid version. And I could let this dry, come back in with some dry brush more. I can do all of them. And if you ask me which one of these do I do, you're gonna hate my answer. It's a smart aleck answer. Yes, both. Often it's a hybrid of the two, because sometimes the hybrid of the two is more playful and fun and quick and easy and exciting. At the same time, yes, I would be quite willing to come back in afterwards with my pen and do some line work if I wanted to. It would make sense. No, not there, John. How about a line over here that was more like that, and then okay. That gives, this is basically the same thing, but it doesn't look as realistic. It's more technique playful, if you will, as opposed to being more observational. But in some ways it might be more fun to look at, okay? This might give us more, the hybrid can give us more excitement. This one can give us straightforward bits and pieces that we can, I'll fill that in tonight before you guys go so you can see what it looks like. But then you can imagine this one, if you look, I just looked at it, it is so sopping wet. I need to let that dry before I put the next layers on. That's the frustration we'll have with this one. It will feel too slow. If you manage it just right, you can maybe not have to wait more than 5 or 10 minutes, but most of us are going to put too much water on or too little water on at different times. So I think this one will give us a very classic approach. This will give us a more modern, straightforward, or simpler, a super old-fashioned or a super modern. That's what most modern folks want to do. They want to go back to not the classical approach, but to like a quicker, simpler, more direct approach. Which one's right? How do you like your cheeseburger? You know? Do you like your hot dog with chili, mustard, and onion?
Vegan.
Vegan. That's see? Vegan chili, vegan hot dog, vegan cheese. Onion's okay, I guess.
Yeah.
Are you vegan as well?
Just become vegan.
Congratulations.
I got bit by a tick. I got alpha-gal, so I'm allergic to all the
My sister,
eggs and dairy. And
my sister-in-law,
Yeah.
has gone through
No,
that,
yes.
and she actually had to come. She loved drinking beer. She loved beer.
I still love beer.
But the problem is that some of the beers and some of the wines are actually filtered through
Something she was allergic to, I guess.
part of it's actually a meat product. It
It that one hadn't got me
That's
yet.
scary.
she's been zapped. So
Pancakes got me yesterday. I don't know what they put in them yesterday, but I got sick yesterday.
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Ouch.
no.
That's no fun.
No.
Yeah, she thought she was getting better because sometimes people get better with that. It goes away over
That's
time.
what they say. I've just started, so I don't know.
She's been 5 years. She hasn't seen anything get better.
Yeah.
It's only gotten worse.
Okay.
So what I'm going to have you do is I'm going to put out. I've got some stuff to make some still lifes with, and I'd like you guys to use on the first one. I'd like you to use ink brush drawing. On the second one, we want to use ink wash drawing. Okay.